tell you one last time. I don't wanna be more than no, I will not die. You can try it no more just so you can kill my child. All the times that I've sold, still got my pedal through the metal. Told you I'll be immortal, I tell you one last time. I don't wanna be normal, so you can stay inside. That's why they say that you're local, you see this world is mine. I'm not leaving you hope for them time. I'm taking more than more than I will show them one more. So I tell you one last time. I don't know what's so hard, can you get it through your mind?
Welcome to another exciting episode of Peak for Society. My guest today is an author and the podcast host of the Healthy Healer podcast, the one and only Dr. Fred. Dr. Fred, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really great. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me. I really look forward to our conversation.
Definitely, Dr. Fred. Can you tell everybody a little more about yourself, though? Let them know who Dr. Fred is, and then we'll get into everything else.
Yeah, so I'm a healer. I was born a healer. I arrived here as a healer. I was, there was a conflict going on in the family of origin. My brothers were 10 and 14 years older than me, and it was them and my parents, and as you can imagine, two adolescent boys, kicking butt and taking names, and it was hard for my family. And as I've been told afterwards, I was sent here to bring unity and bring joy and peace to that family. And I did so through communication. So I learned very early on about the power of communication. I was very excited to learn how to communicate. And I thought that would happen in school, because what else would they want to teach us in school? I mean, there's nothing more important than learning how to interconnect with each other. But of course, when I got to school, I realized that they were really just smothering all efforts to communicate. If I started to speak, if I started to actually say what was important to me, then people would just tell me to be quiet, sit down, and do what the teacher says, follow rules and be compliant. But I was very, very disappointed at the time. And I thought, well, maybe as you go somewhere, they learn this. They must have learned it in school somewhere. So maybe junior high. And of course, it got worse in junior high, then worse again in high school. I was like, oh my goodness. So I really learned how to communicate, but I learned how to communicate when I was out of school, when I was riding my bicycle, when I was going into neighborhoods that I wasn't allowed to go in, when I was staying out late at night, when I was, seeing where people on the other side live, when I was just checking it out, being adventurous and explorative. And that became the real roots of who I am with respect to communication. And I tried to go to college to learn how to communicate, but that was unsuccessful, of course, same reason. And so I dropped out, and then I tried again. I came back for a new industry that was coming up, and they told me that I would be good at it. You might have heard of the industry. It was called computers. I was like, yeah, let's do that. And I went into the industry thinking that, I'll maybe this is what my aptitude is about, punch cards and batch jobs and Fortran and COBOL. Like, no, that's not it either. So I dropped out again and promised never to go back to school, but got a job. My mom made me get a job because, that's what moms do. I got a job as a civil service worker, an adolescent child care worker at a state mental health facility for adolescent boys. And finally, I was communicating. I was communicating effectively. I was communicating and causing cures, causing healing in that process. It was very rewarding. And so I stayed on past the original 3 weeks that I thought I would last. And I stayed on. And I really, really appreciated that job. I appreciated talking to these kids like there was nothing wrong with them, because there really wasn't. They were just finding themselves where they were. And the healing that could take place in all directions when I really understood and resonated and connected with these folks, these people. And so I decided that at that point I could go back to school one more time and learn how to be a psychiatrist, because I really hated the direction that psychiatry was going. So I really went into the field because I couldn't stand it. That's really the truth. And I went in thinking that I could maybe be a hero and present the last remaining vestiges of what it takes to be a communicator and be a doctor at the same time. So I went back and did the sunken cost thing, finished my undergrad, went to medical school in Chicago at Northwestern, and then got my residency, and then got my child and adolescent fellowship. And when I got out, indeed, my vision had taken place where psychiatry had washed away communication as being an important tool. I was like, wow, man, this is like really rough. So for the first several years, I did what I was asked. I did what I was told. I did what was required of me, but it was misaligned with who I knew I was. They wanted me to diagnose and create treatment plans and give medicines and all that. I was like, man, I didn't like that very much. So I did what I did. And halfway through my career, like 2006, I started shifting. And because I couldn't live with the duplicity, I couldn't live with knowing what was right, but doing something entirely different. Connection is where the action is, right? I mean, when we have a human connection, that's why you and me are meeting today. You're hoping for a connection, and we're hoping that we can exploit our connection and make a difference for the people who are listening to us.
Yeah, of course.
What else are we doing? That's it. That's all that we have, really. That's ultimately what we're all seeking. And so I changed my practice a little bit. I took a bunch of people off of medicine. I took them off their diagnosis and I gave them their life back. And it was an epiphany. It was a beautiful thing. And then I really have been basing the rest of my practice from 2006 forward into this idea of communication being at the heart of all healing. That's how Welcome to Humanity eventually got created as the overarching brand. And the two books that we've already sort of talked about, the Find Your True Voice and the Creative 8, Healing Through Creativity and Self-Expression. And my up and coming book, Welcome to Humanity, which is the overarching sort of autobiographical story of how I got to be who I got to be. So some expanded version of what I've already told you. And, the designation of the Moss method, the designation of the Undoctor. And what is the Undoctor? That's what I'm affectionately known as now. And the Undoctor is someone who uses unconventional means to give unconditional love so that I can undiagnose, unmedicate, and then undoctrinate people, taking people out of the system in a system that is probably not helping them and may be making them worse, and giving them other choices to bring themselves back to an optimized life when things aren't feeling so well. When things aren't well, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. That's the whole point. Just because things aren't well, just because you're miserable, just because life sucks, just because you found a place to be, in a lot of pain or comfortable in some ways, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. We don't blame a log for burning in a fire. And as Krishnamurti said, it is no sign of mental health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And we just really go with maybe there's nothing wrong with you in the first place. And if there's nothing wrong with you, maybe you don't have to go to a doctor. And if you don't have to go to a doctor, then you're not going to get medicines which are going to make you worse. And if you don't get medicine that's going to make you worse, you have a better chance of actually finding yourself back on the road that you needed to be on in order to live a life that's valuable.
No, I think you're right on that point, though. Like a lot of people, that's their first thought when it comes to therapy. So, like, oh, I don't want to be put on medicine. But with so many different things these days, there's so many things out there. And that was the great thing with the show was that's why I invite so many different people to the show, like different point of views. Like you and everybody else was just like, there's more than therapy. Is my whole point of this thing is like there's more than therapy, guys. Like there's so many other options out there these days that you can do that you don't have to worry about that being your biggest fear. Now, figuring out what your diagnosis is, okay, all right, figure out where you got to go from there. Yeah, all right, but there's so many different options these days with the different advancements people are making and all the other things that they're bringing into the party. It's like it's so much better for people because where mental health was before to where it's now. I mean, you've seen the change of it. You didn't even like it. You're like, I just did it because I hated it.
Yeah. Yeah, there really is. There really is a lot of different opportunities here to get yourself back on order. But really at the heart of the matter, in the end, you may say there's lots of things. There's really only one thing that actually exceeds all other things. And that is at the heart of all healing is a human connection. That's really required almost in all situations. It's true. You can go meditate in a cave in the, somewhere. And that's a space you could say that isn't about human connection, but it is sort of about human connection because it's about the absence of human connection. But ultimately what we're really looking for is either human connection or defining the importance of human connection. And in that process, that's where the explosive healing takes place instantaneously, without any side effects, without any need for authorization, without any copay, without any medications, without any doctor's orders. You can actually connect with another person and create cure and create healing on the spot for real and permanent.
No, I agree with that though, because doing this show has been very therapeutic for me. When I started in the beginning, I was just doing a mental health podcast. Now it's like you're watching the evolution of Pete as I'm interacting with all these new people and all these great conversations we're getting into. It's almost therapeutic because, I get to meet new people every week. I'm doing this, recording new episodes with everybody. Hell, in the first season, I did like 200 different interviews with different people. And it was great. I loved every minute of it because I craved that human interaction. It was awesome because I got to meet new people. I had to learn new things about people, but why do you feel like they don't teach that now? It's like you would figure if this is something that we're all looking for, why not teach these kids at a younger age how to communicate better versus, just letting it just kind of become what it's becoming.
Well, you'd have to have a motivation to have the people in society get stronger instead of weaker. And sometimes the powers that be have no interest in actually making uh, we'll say the inmates stronger because makes us a little bit more threatening.
Yeah. No, and with the introduction of social media, because where it's come from to where it's now, man, we started with AOL. Now you've got like everything under the sun you could list here that different people communicate on. It's like I feel like that's where the issues, that crave for that human connection is really there. But a lot of times you don't connect with the right people. Sometimes you run into the wrong people, and I guess that's just kind of how it's going to be anyway. You run into people, even if you start communicating with people. Sometimes you're going to run into a couple bad eggs and things like that too.
Well, running into bad eggs is no problem. That's just part of the humanity as well. Bad eggs are part of the scene. And you
Hmm.
get bad eggs, good eggs, right eggs, wrong eggs, true eggs, false eggs. You get whatever you get.
Hmm.
And all of that is part of the human experience. The smorgasbord that includes sour lemons also includes, strawberry ice cream. And all of those things are really important. They're all part of life, and we can embrace all of life, including the unpleasant nature of life, because certainly life can be very difficult and has been since the beginning of time. I've done some research and I'm trying to find a society where life wasn't difficult. So
Right.
far, it hasn't occurred, and so I think what we've had here since the very beginning of time is that being a human is a very challenging experience.
Well, yeah, to think about the evolution of man, where we came from to where now, all the different societies that existed, all the different things, if anything, you think about it, the Egyptians were ahead of a lot of people with the way they built those pyramids and things. People today are still trying to figure out how they even got to do that without any heavy equipment and things like that too. Like a lot of fascinating things have happened along the way. But it's just to me, it's just like nowadays, if you look at social media and things like that, I feel like it has a real big influence on everybody because that's everybody wants to do it. Like everybody's like, oh, I want to be a social media influencer, which is great because but not everybody can do that job. Or what is it, the streaming of games thing too? Well, I want to be a streamer. I want to do this, and it's like, but they don't realize the hours people put into these things and the mental fatigue it takes to do a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, it is something to actually make a difference and then, be monumental, be memorialized and monumental, creates a group of people who are really care about what you say, what you do, and to be able to make a difference one to many is a challenge. And, we now have the tools to be able to do that with social media. We can, if we become famous, if we become somebody who people like and tell other people to like, then all of a sudden we can have tens of thousands or hundreds or even millions of views. And then we think we're really important all of a sudden, and because people are caring about what we are saying. And although we get a personal sense of feeling important, the question is, how are you best utilizing? How are you best utilizing the time?
Exactly. I think that's a really good question, though. And so my next question leading into is your podcast. How long have you been doing your podcast?
Well, my podcast is presently dormant. This is my third podcast. I had Welcome to Humanity. Then I had another, and Welcome to Humanity has about 120 drops. And then after that, I did one called The Healthy Healer. And a Healthy Healer also had about 100 and, I don't know, 140 drops or so. This was a 2 time a week one where I was interviewing healers who, in a roundabout way, found their healing skills different than how they had been taught in school. And then the third one I did was with my friend Sam, and that was called Insanity, 2 different words. And that was a little bit more raucousy as we took on some of the more high profile people. We have access to some important people in the world, and we had some cool interviews. But that one, I think we only had about 20 or 25 drops altogether. And I've been a podcaster since approximately 2018 as a host. And then I've been on about, I don't know,
It's like I lost count.
300 shows as a guest, I think.
Yeah, I've done a lot of shows. It's been fun. I enjoy podcasting actually. This is my thing. I love to do this ever since I started doing because I had one prior to this and it was just me and a couple friends messing around for a bit. I was telling these crazy stories of things I'd gone through in life and people are just so shocked to hear these things. I was like, oh, okay. So I ended up switching to mental health because when I got to the men's mental health episode, we all decided to do was do my research, and a lot of the numbers were just shocking to me. So, and I dealt my own issues too at the same time, and I was like, you know what, maybe I'll talk more about this because when I was looking at it, my personal opinion was I felt like there were a lot of doctors talking about it, but I just like, we're the average people just talking. Like, I have no background at all. I am just one guy who's very interested about the topic of mental health. Every week I meet new people, and it was a chance to interact with people because I like talking to people, honestly. I didn't mind having conversations with people. I used to wait tables for a long time. So that drive was, I just love meeting new people. I'm always fascinated about new people. So I was like, you know what, maybe I'll do a podcast and we'll see where it goes. And then ever since then, this thing just shot off. I've had a lot of people on here with like top level podcasts. I've had a lot of people with way more success than me, but it's been great though, because, you get to meet these people and it's the way I want to do it. It's like, this is my show. I get to do how I want to do my show. And people have been really receptive this past year with it though. A lot of people email me, say, "Hey, Pete, I love what you're doing. I like this conversation you have with this person." So, it's like, it feels good to hear that people like what I'm doing, but I'm enjoying creating a safe space for people to come and talk about things because, like, "Hey, listen, you're so understanding." I'm like, I am. I'm very understanding. I knew exactly when I got into this thing, I had to be very understanding. The stories I was told, they're wild. Some weeks they're intense, but some weeks it depends. But, at the same time, I started learning more about myself though. Like, energy, I'm energy sensitive. I'm an empath. Things like that started coming up along the way, which is really cool because, I could never explain these certain situations I got into. And then I met these people that just all of a sudden appeared out of nowhere. They were on my list of people I'm talking to. And I'm like, oh, this is crazy. This happens to be the same thing I was discussing, and it's been fun. I loved it. I've enjoyed it. I think we're at like, God, I don't even remember how many episodes there. We're like 300 plus now almost, of just doing these interviews. Like I said, the first year I did 200 interviews was just like, people like, it's a lot, but at the same time, I learned so many different things. I got to meet so many cool people. I had a lot of fun moments on the show with people, just posting clips of things like that. And then people this year started gaining more traction because people started emailing me. I've been invited to come do a bunch of panels and things like that. Doing all these different things that I wouldn't have gotten to do if had I not got into podcasting and doing this kind of thing. And at the end of the day, I still would have done it if people weren't even listening because I enjoy doing it. I like talking to people. I love like you said, the human interaction. I just love talking to people about anything. Like, I can have conversations about most topics. So
Yeah, yeah, that's great. I love that you're doing that, and I love that you're open to hearing pretty much about wherever people are and allowing people to a safe space to make a difference and to speak what's important to them.
yeah, definitely. Because a lot of people just want to be heard, and they're like, the
That's what
stories they've
people
told
want
me are
more than
wild.
anything, dude. That's the whole point. That's exactly what I'm saying about you just said the whole point of the whole podcast. That's what people want more than anything. They don't want to be diagnosed. They don't want to be necessarily told what's wrong with them. They don't want a treatment plan. They don't need medications. What they need more than anything all the time is what you just said, to be heard.
Right, exactly. So, Dr. Fred, I did want to ask you though, what got you started on the Creative 8? That's your first book, right?
The first book I wrote was The Creative 8. Yeah. And what I really noticed at that time when, as I was falling away from the conventional strategy or sequence of diagnosing someone, telling them what's wrong with them, and starting a treatment plan or some medication, people kept on asking me, well, what am I going to do instead? What am I going to do instead? And what I had noticed over time is that when people were creative, when people were actually doing something like art or music or dancing or singing or drama, cooking, writing, gardening, and those kind of things, they were actually their symptoms disappeared. Their discomfort disappeared. Sometimes it diminished or decreased or sometimes disappeared altogether. And when that happened, that was really great. That was like something that they could feel like, that they could feel the relief while they were doing any of those things, whether pounding on the side of a table for music or tracing or dancing in the shower, maybe singing or something like that. I don't suggest dancing in the shower, by the way. And, what we have here is the opportunity of when we're actually creating and self-expressing ourselves, we get an opportunity to relieve ourselves of our discomfort. And then we can choose whether or not we want to go back to the discomfort we had before we started, or we can go forward from right there and actually relieve ourselves of the pain and serious discomfort that had been experiencing before we started our artistic expression.
No, I feel music is a big thing these days, and I love inviting different artists to come on the show and talk to them and pick their brains about things because we all use music as a healing process for a lot of people. There's a question I'll ask you here in a little bit about that has to be related with music, but it's because I just love music. I had an interview with somebody and we discussed music the whole time. And it was just great because it's like everybody has that one song that whenever you're in a bad mood, it just always lifts your spirits. So you start singing that song, or what I suggest a lot of people journaling is a great one too. For people like me that have anxiety, it's like my thoughts get jumbled in my head, and if I write them out, it works really great. I tell people sometimes I randomly are talking to myself, like I'm saying things out loud, and to other people it'll appear I'm talking to myself, but what I'm doing is I'm just getting the thoughts out, and as I'm hearing them come out, the level of just how dumb I think they are, because like my brain likes to reinvent things for me sometimes and turn things into the situation it isn't. But when I start speaking it out and or I write it down or anything like that, or I tell somebody about it, it's just because I want to hear how dumb it sounds coming out of my mouth. And I'm like, okay, well, it probably wasn't like that as you start really logically looking at it. Because and sometimes it's just like my anxiety takes it and just has me a high alert. And I'm just thinking everything I take and everybody says is just the wrong way instead of taking a deep breath and just thinking about what people are saying to me. And that's what I hate about text messages the most. Is because when people text you things, it's hard to tell what they mean by the because you can't get emotion from a text. You can read what the text says, and then it can be interpreted 20,000 different ways. I get in this problem with a lot of people. It's like you send me a text message, I'm sitting there for 20 minutes looking at it, going, "What the hell do you mean by this?" And you want to, it's hard though. So, but the other thing too with that was I also had to learn that when you send a text message, doesn't mean it's an actual conversation, and I found that, for me, it was really funny to tell people about this. I was like, I had to teach myself that text messages mean that you're not going to get an instant response. So if I really wanted to talk to you, it's just calling you on the phone kind of thing. I'd rather just call you, have a voice conversation, or just see you face to face and talk to you. But I always thought that was funny to me because it was just like, I never thought about it until someone had pointed it out to me and said, "Hey, you notice that's what you do, right? You get mad when nobody texts you back in like 5 seconds because they're not sitting at their phone waiting for your message."
Yeah, so texting is, you notice that texting is not on my list of the creative eight, and the reason for that is because it's not a true and honest art. It's a way to be misinterpreted. It's a way to be
Hmm.
misunderstood. It's a way to be distracted. It's a way to default into a delayed conversation rather than having a conversation. Back in the day when telephones were first being developed, you have to imagine that it was like that was already distant. That was what the telephone was to being with somebody, what texting is to telephone.
Yeah.
Now these days we think, okay, I'm not going to text, I'm actually going to call. And then somehow that's going to put us close. But you got to remember that calling used to be the old texting. Like
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
either with somebody or calling them, and calling them was the distant one. Now you're either calling somebody or texting them, and texting them is the distant one. It's pretty interesting how that goes.
Yeah, you could video chat them too as well with all the different features these days with everything
Yeah, video
else.
chat and
Yeah.
Snapchat and the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it. I think that's where we're going now. It's like a lot of these sites like TikTok and thing have the big social gathering rooms where everybody can get together because everybody can see each other visually. So that's why it's so popular because you can physically see these people as you're talking to them. And you still get that sense of human connection. And then obviously, if you're down in the comment section commenting things, it's hard to read because you're limited to so many characteristics you can put down or how many characters you can type in there at a time. So you're like your sentences get broken up. So it forces you to get up and be more social, honestly, because you have no choice. Because if you're trying to give out a complete thought, you got to give it either in broken sentences or just go up there and just say what it is. So,
Yeah. Yeah, the constraints and the restraints of each platform and the attitude and the ecosystem, the difference between Facebook and Instagram and versus TikTok or versus YouTube or versus LinkedIn, they're like different neighborhoods,
hmm.
it's really interesting. It's like the LinkedIn neighborhood is much more business oriented and it seems like it's calmer and more focused. The Facebook and Instagram is like the Wild West. You just see whatever you see and you get to post whatever you want to post, and people's opinions are outrageous and different and controversial and adversarial. And then with TikTok, it's kind of blasts here and there. Like you get to go on there and just like dopamine blasts left and right. And then with YouTube, you get to explore whatever you want to explore, including blasts or including learning or education or entertainment. And, YouTube is just another place where you can get expanded videos or totally education, or you can have the shorts where you can deliver like a TikTok or IG method or message in such a way that it's heard um, in the context intended.
Yeah, navigating social media when when promoting this podcast is interesting because I'm learning so many different things. Because everybody has a different standard to how they can do things. Well, your video has to be a certain size for TikTok, or this one. I'm just like, you know what? Let's just make it one size fits all here. Okay, this is hard enough trying to figure out how to post these things, and then you have to have the hashtags and all the other things that show up on there, and it's just like, oh god, it's a headache because
It is.
at first it was just like I was trying to figure out, but I've learned a lot of things as I go now. I've got different things in place because in the original, when I started doing the show, I tried to do everything by hand. I was like, yeah, no, this isn't working. So I found a lot of digital like schedulers and things that post my content for me so I can be consistently working on what I want to work out and then it'll do the rest for me, which is kind of nice because now I don't have to do all that. But at first, I remember those days. I was like, I'm trying to post all these clips. I gotta post it here, I gotta go there, I gotta post it there. And it's just like, it was mentally draining because it was just like, but I enjoyed what I was doing, and people were responding to these episodes and things like that too. And then when I started doing a lot of and things like that too, and then TikTok, man, oh man, that one's a little rougher though. I am actually a part of one of these agencies. I have one that I'm a part of now that they're teaching you the insides and outs of how things work, how to stay visible in the algorithm and things like that. And I was just like, okay, and stuff like that. So now I can manipulate my scheduler more and have it fit what it needs to keep me on the algorithm so people are seeing my videos and then people are sharing them because that's what you want. You want people to come look at them and then you want people to spit them back out for you. And as it kept going and it got easier to discuss these things out loud and tell people what I was dealing with, I think my biggest fear though is that when I tell people what I deal with, it's like people are going to look at you differently. Being a two-time suicide survivor, it's like people look at you in a weird manner every time you say that to them because then they're looking at you like, oh, I don't want to say something to upset them, and then all the misconceptions that come with all that kind of stuff, and things like that too. So like as the show kept going, I was like, we need to start addressing some of these issues. So we started talking more about certain things. In Suicide Prevention Month, I was actually did a couple episodes with people about it. We were talking just about that strictly. Now I know it's a sensitive subject. I did put the disclaimer in the beginning of all the episodes and told people, but there were so many fascinating stories surrounding that, that you just like, there was one that was just so interesting. You didn't even know that what had happened until she had told you what happened. Cause you're building up to the anticipation, but it's like the conversations got easier though, because they weren't so scary because it's like, you're talking about these things, but you're better understanding what some of these people are thinking as they're going through the process.
Yeah, yeah. So, you could talk about sensitive issues. You can explore sensitive issues normally, like in the suspense that you're talking about, where you thought it was going to go a different direction. You didn't even realize what she was talking about until she got to the punchline.
Yeah.
That's a function of communication, like how do you lay out your topics as you are discussing them or when you're communicating them? Like, what tactic do you use? How do you, reframe things, or what do you withhold until the end? And, when do you deliver a punchline? And how can you keep people riveted to your story while you're giving it so that they're there at the end when you give them the real meat and potatoes?
Hmm.
This is all in the style of learning how to communicate, which, of course, what little Freddie, what he was really looking for back in the day is like, what's all the nuances of communication? And now here I am, 67, soon to be 68, and maybe I'm starting to get a little bit of a grasp of how to communicate effectively.
Right. No, I get that though, because when I was a kid, I always felt like I wasn't heard, and things like that. So now I have this podcast where now it's my voice. You have to hear me, and it's like at first I learned a lot of things. At first, it wasn't easy to record either. Like I did learn that though as I go. It got easier to record, and like now I can have conversation with anybody. Like we could hit record, and we just jump right into a conversation. At first, it was a lot of nerves, because I didn't know what I was doing. I still was learning a lot of stuff. I really was podcasting for like less than a year. I didn't know what I was talking about, and then when we got into mental health, I did a lot of research, and I started looking up different things and all these different conditions or these different diagnoses that people had. I went and looked into because I was like, dude, I don't know what that is, but I'm curious what it is now, kept labeling me into more things. So then as we go, I was looking for different things as people are emailing me and telling me about their stories and things like that too. So the first season was like, the first half was just kind of like, me figuring things out. And then when we hit the new year, I just shot off like a rocket. I was like, you know what, let's go for it. I'm going to jump into every conversation possible. what do I have to lose at this point? Because at least I'm going to cover every topic possible. Say no if I have to certain things that don't fit into the parameters. And it was like figuring out what exactly area I wanted to be in. But I was just like, you know what, we're going to cover everything. What the hell? So but we've had a lot of interesting conversations. I've learned a lot of things about people as we go. You learn different things. You have great conversations with people about all the different things they're doing. Art and psychedelics and all these other things, sound therapies, and all the different things. I'm always fascinated to see what people are doing these days and getting different people in the conversations, and stuff like that too, and it's been fun, honestly. I like it. I think this has been great. I think I've learned a lot from the beginning. You can see that my conversation style from the beginning went from what it was to where it's now. It's more relaxed. And in the beginning, it was kind of like, you had to be just like this. And I'm like, no, okay, I'm going to do this the way I want to do it. If people like it, they like it. If they don't like it, they don't like it. At that point,
Yeah.
it's not going to matter either way what I do.
Yeah. How people feel about you is not your business. That's really the truth.
Exactly. And it's hard sometimes, especially because my
Sure.
life's on the internet and I tell people all the time. People are like, I'm like, you can literally Google me now. And I think that was hilarious when I found that. I'm like, you could Google me? I'm like, okay, well, that's pretty interesting to see. Hell, I even show up on ChatGPT. I thought that was great too. I'm like, well, apparently I'm going somewhere at this point. I dealt with a lot of imposter syndrome at first because of the fact that I just couldn't believe how much demand there was for these people wanting to talk to me. Like I was all the way out to July of 2025 when the beginning of this show, and I wasn't even done with the year yet. It was that insane. There was that many people just lined up months in advance that would just want to come talk to me. And I was like, this is pretty crazy. So I just couldn't accept the fact that it was getting as successful as it was and people were excited to talk about these things. But then as it went on, it got easier to discuss these things more and more and more. And then I went on these other shows, and I'm pretty much everywhere you can find me now. Like, it's like, I tell people the same thing. Anybody that gets in a relationship, I'm like, I just want to let you know that my life's on the magnifying glass. I'm on Google. Everything about my life is out there. I hope like you just have to kind of go with the punches with it. Please accept it. Please understand that I may bring you up in a conversation or something or two, just if it's relevant to what their conversation is, kind of things like that, and I'm very upfront about these things with a lot of people. And some people can't handle that. A lot of people are just like, well, it's just not for me. Well, I respectfully get that. It's just what I do. I'm on the internet, everybody can just Google me. So my life is not like it's a secrecy thing, but I don't get a lot of people that, invade your privacy kind of thing, So I think that was my biggest fear in the beginning of the whole thing is just being honest with people and people finding out the true truth about the things that I really dealt with every day that I didn't tell a lot of people. Because then you get those questions of, well, why didn't you tell me? Because if I told you, most of you can't handle this conversation. You find a lot of people that don't understand that they usually want to tell you all the wrong answers to what you're doing instead of asking you, hey, how can I help you? Because I know a lot of times what I could do best for myself. Sometimes you can't do nothing. You just got to let me just go through the emotions and figure it out, but just sit there and kind of watch. I mean, it's hard, but it is what it is at that point.
It is what it is. Exactly. And, that's the best you can hope for at this point is to just let people know that you're helping, you're here to assist them and it is what it is. And you're here to open up what's, delicate topics and to create
Hmm.
a safe space to speak what's true in their mind.
Right, exactly. Dr. Fred, we're at the fun part of the show. I'm going to ask you one of the two questions, okay? So my first question is actually music related. So the question to you is, if your mental health had a song, what would you say that song would be? This is a really interesting question for everybody because they love the answers you get are just all over the place, and I love it.
Well, it's a combination of Amazing Grace and You Can't Always Get What You Want.
That's awesome. That is an interesting combination though, because mine was like I had the same thing was for me. I had two different ones. I was like, if I had explained to you the days that my anxiety's on high, it would be something that's just constantly that constant static motion going. Or if it was like those days where my depression's high, it's like, it's kind of like a slower kind of song, type of thing. You fill in the blanks, whatever fits in those categories for you, though, but it was always interesting because music is a massive part of my life. I love music. I listen to music all day, every day. I'm always listening to something. Like if my headphones are on, I'm usually listening to something, and it doesn't matter what it is. I'll listen to oldies, I'll listen to all this other stuff. It's just because that's just what made me feel good. It's like, listen to this, you get in the car, you start singing all these other great things, and stuff like that too.
Yeah.
So, but my next question, and the reason I started this whole podcast is that if you could break the stigma about mental health. Now, when I ask you this question, I mean, anything that you've seen nowadays that you just like feel like people just need to stop believing or just want to debunk something, what would you say that thing would be?
Mental health is just a conversation. There's no such thing as a diagnosis. You do have one diagnosis. I know what your diagnosis is, by the way.
Yeah. What is it? Well, Dr. Fred, what is it then?
Yeah. Well, let me look up something, and I'll just make sure. Your diagnosis is Pete Dalke Jr.
Yeah,
That's it.
yeah,
You don't have another diagnosis, sir.
yeah. There's just things I
You
deal
don't
with that.
have a mental health diagnosis. There's nothing wrong with you. So we don't have to stigmatize anything
Yeah.
unless you want to stigmatize all of humanity. Each
No,
one of us is struggling and bumbling, tumbling, and stumbling through challenges, obstacles, and hurdles to make it through this world and make a difference today, right now, and to make decisions that are aligned with what we think is important. And it's difficult. And the only diagnosis you need to know that you have is that you are you.
that's a true point because I do tell people a lot of times just because you have a diagnosis doesn't mean you have to make it be you. It's you're an
Maybe
individual.
they don't even have a diagnosis. They only have a diagnosis when they accept it.
That's true too. That's very true too.
Just because somebody tells you you got a diagnosis doesn't mean you have one.
That's true. Just because people tell me I'm crazy doesn't mean I'm crazy. That's okay. All right. Same theory makes sense.
Yeah, that's right.
So, Dr. Fred, with that being said, did you want to go ahead and tell everybody a little bit when your new book is coming out? I know it's coming out fairly soon from the time this recording happens.
Yeah, I think my new book is expected in the second quarter, probably by April. Welcome to Humanity, and the subtitle's not exactly clear at this point. So we're really looking at the overarching: how did I get to be who I got to be? The transcripts and the foundation of the book are already laid out, and now we're expanding it and creating chapters. It's an autobiographical nature of how I got to be who I got to be in the world of psychiatry. It seems that people are interested in it. For me, it's just my life. I don't even know that it's interesting, but people tell me that it's interesting. And each time I come on a podcast or I share my story, people tell me that I, should write a book or maybe even write a movie. And so the new books is very exciting and should be available in April or in May. And, the literary agents and publishers are all working with me to make sure not only that it comes out quickly, but that it comes out excellently.
Yeah, definitely for sure. And then for your other books, did you want to give everybody a quick synopsis of what some of the other ones are in case they're interested in some of the other work until that
Yeah, the
time?
creative 8, as we already spoke of, is the 8 things you can do, and there's really more than 8. Art, music, dancing, singing, drama, cooking, writing, and gardening are the 8, and those are things that self-expressive techniques in the world of performing and visual arts that actually get your point across and create some relief inside of this crazy world of feeling smothered or unheard or miscommunicated. This is a great way to communicate and relieve ourselves at the same time. And then Find Your True Voice really just takes advantage of the idea that we have put so much muck and so much rust and dust and mud on top of who we are. And what Find Your True Voice is just removing the things that are in the way of you being your truest self. So taking the things in the way that are taking the things out of the way that are in the way of you being your true self. And there's some cool exercises in there and some cool theories and some cool stories. And you can find that book. I actually send it out for free. Findyourtruevoicebook.com. And you can, just for shipping and handling. And then the other book you can find on Amazon. That's The Creative 8. Healing through creativity and self-expression.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, Dr. Fred, I wanted to thank you so much for coming to hang out with me today. I had a great time. I thought it was great meeting you. I look forward to checking out the new book and see the story that is Dr. Fred himself. Do you have any last words you want to say to anybody before we start signing off?
Well, my most famous last words here is there really may be nothing wrong with you. That's the biggest, most important thing. Is there just because you're uncomfortable does not mean there's something wrong with you. And if you can really get that, you can get, wow, we're living in a world where discomfort is part of the package. And when we can really get that and still relate to each other and not feel less than, not feel afflicted or affected or defective, we start from a whole new solid ground.
Okay. Well, with that being said, guys, we're wrap up this episode of Pete vs. Anxiety. Dr. Fred, again, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you coming and being a guest on the show today. We look forward to the new book, guys. Don't forget to go check out some of his other work, where he told everybody to find everything. Do you want to plug that website one more time for everybody, just in case?
Yeah, the website, drfred360.com or welcometohumanity.net. And I troll around on Facebook, unfortunately, and I'm also hanging out on LinkedIn. And then Undoctor Reset is my most useful new program where I'm helping people learn how to be undoctors themselves and how to create cure and peace and freedom and joy and safety inside of a world that doesn't necessarily support those actions.
I love it. Absolutely love it. Thank you again, Dr. Fred, for being here, guys. With that being said, we're going to wrap up this episode of Pete vs. Anxiety. You know where to find me. I'm Pete vs. Anxiety on X all the way down to TikTok. I'm on Spotify all the way down to Pandora Radio. And as I always say, it costs nothing absolutely to be kind to somebody. One kind act you could do could save someone's life, or hell, you can make their day. I'm Pete vs. Anxiety signing off saying, don't ask how your day is today. Say, hey, how's your mental health? All right, we're all...